All right, good morning, everyone. We're back. All right, on behalf of the Gettysburg Foundation and the Gettysburg National Military Park and Eisenhower National Historic Site, I am Wayne Motz, and it is my honor to be the President and Chief Executive Officer here at the Gettysburg Foundation. So we want to welcome all of you to the 2022 Sacred Trust book signing. You do not have a problem with your eyeball. There is a black spot in the screen. They're going to have to change that out during intermission, so I'm sorry, folks. You're going to have to look at that. Sorry, Jeff. But of our best laid plans for our LED wall here, which we still think is a good idea. So Jeff will suffer through that. Battlefield guide, you know how to adjust, right? Going through all that. All right. Well, we're pleased to collaborate with the park and invite renowned Civil War historians and authors, National Park Service rangers, licensed battlefield guides, and experts to participate in the Sacred Trust to share their unique perspective with our visitors. We want to thank Steve Sims, the superintendent of Gettysburg National Military Park, who is in the house. Thank you, Steve. And also Chris Gwynn, the Chief of Interpretation and Education, for his whole team, all of the Park Service team. And of course, I want to thank the Gettysburg Foundation team, some over in the tent, others elsewhere. We have IT here that helped make this day possible. So we've got a lot of hands in the pie, everyone, just for you. Our first speaker today is Jeff Harding, and he will detail key findings from his book, The Gettysburg Lost Love Story, The Ill-Fated Romance of General John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt. True fate, and highlights the ensuing journey that led him to the research and his research associate, Mary Stanford Pitkin, down the path to discovery. In this special behind-the-scenes presentation, which was prepared expressly, for the Sacred Trust, Jeff shares research insights and selected images pertaining to the remarkable story of heroism, tragedy, sacrifice, and perseverance. Jeff is a licensed battlefield guide here at the Gettysburg National Military Park, independent historian, author, and leadership consultant. He retired 33 years as a career from the Navy Department as a civilian and published works detailing historical subjects. He has a keen interest in solving old mysteries, and definitely done that today, hasn't he? His latest quest involved a mystery that has haunted Gettysburg historians for over 150 years, the true story of John Reynolds' secret fiancée, Catherine Hewitt. And we're very blessed here in the house today, right up here in the front row, to have the great-great-grand nieces of John Fulton Reynolds and their significant others. They're right here in the front row. Mary Scott and Carol Eberhard, they're right here as special guests of Jeff's, the foundation, and the Gettysburg National Military Park. So welcome, everyone. A very important day here, July 1st, of course, for John Fulton Reynolds and for us here at Sacred Trust. So without any further ado, my friend and your speaker today, Jeff Harding. Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you, Wayne, very much. I sincerely appreciate you inviting me. The foundation has my sincere appreciation, as does Gettysburg National Military Park and Eisenhower National Historic Site. It's an honor to be here. It truly is. Let me put these back on, make sure I don't forget anything here. I also need to thank my publisher, of course, Arcadia Press / History Press. And I am indeed honored to be here and have the Reynolds family descendants that were so cooperative and helpful to me. And we shared time on the battlefield yesterday, and I tell you as a guide, well, you have to actually pinch yourself to make sure it's not a dream that you're out there with these wonderful, wonderful folks. John Fulton Reynolds' sister, Catherine Landis, was their they're the great-great-grand nieces of Reynolds, but the great-great-grandchildren of John Fulton Reynolds' sister, Catherine. So we know that. Also like to recognize their brother, who couldn't be here, John, who was also extremely helpful, had a lot of questions about John Fulton Reynolds' West Point ring, which if you buy the book, you'll see an image of. But I'd like to thank him as well. And then finally, Katie Cleaver, who couldn't be here. She's from another branch of the family, descended from Lydia Reynolds, and she was extremely helpful. In fact, the cover that you see here of the book, that image of Catherine Hewitt, which no one had ever seen, including me, until a 12th hour that came in, and we were able to get it on the book. So extremely kind of her. I'd like to recognize a few people who it was impossible to be here. My mom and dad, who I lost a number of years ago. I dedicated my book to them. They were both inspirational to me, and my mom gave me my love of history, which ultimately brought me to Gettysburg. And also one other individual, Dr. James Terry, who was my mentor, my college professor in history, who opened my eyes to the world of history as I'd never seen it before, and also was a mentor to me as a man. So I thank them. And then finally, please, if you get the book, read the acknowledgements sections. I know a lot of us kind of skip over or gloss over that, but this book could have never been written without Mary Stanford Pitkin, the genealogist associate, and all the people listed. And it's a long acknowledgments section, I'll tell you, but I wanted to make sure everyone that helped me was duly recognized in there. So this book was not necessarily written by Jeff Harding. This was written by all those people who were extremely helpful. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well. Now, it's interesting. Wayne contacted me a few months ago, and he says, Jeff, he said, I got news for you. So I'd like for you to come to Gettysburg and talk about your favorite subject. And I said, Wayne, I'm not so sure the audience wants to hear about my 8 grandchildren. I mean, one of them was born on the anniversary of John Brown's raid, and that's significant, right? Another is born on the anniversary, well, actually the birthday of Mary Edwards Walker. If you don't know who she was, she's the only female recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. So that's pretty cool. But then, you know, you got one daughter, it's got to be the favorite. She happened to have a baby that was born on July 1st. Yeah, so anniversary of the first day of the battle, and it is a special day indeed. So with that, let's do this. I'd like to get started, and if you come on a tour with me sometime, you might hear a little of this. Hopefully you recognize it. So one more time, good morning, Reveille, we're all here. Thank you, you're too kind, too generous. I will say that I think it's meaningful to start that way anytime, because on the morning of July 1st, 163,000 some odd soldiers woke up, not one of them knowing they were about to be on the largest battle to ever take place on the North American continent. Now, what does 163,000 people mean to us? Now, that sounds large, but let's put it in today's terms. I first saw this in Tom Desjardins' wonderful book, These Honored Dead, where he equated it to today's population. I don't know how good you are at math, but if we had a battle this big today, we'd have over 1.5 million people in the battle. 100,000 would die, 500,000 casualties, killed, wounded, missing in action. That's how significant this battle is. 1 out of every 200 people alive in the United States was here as a soldier during this battle in 1863. So I think that's quite incredible. Now, the interesting thing is, people have trouble remembering this battle, despite those numbers. And I'd like to start with this quote, and I think you can read most of it. One of the folks was kidding me, that's an artillery shell that went through the, I don't know what kind, because we don't, maybe octagonal, like a Whitworth, but anyway, the world will little note and long remember what we say here. It can never forget what they did here. And the irony to me in Lincoln's famous quote from, of course, his Gettysburg Address is this. We've remembered Lincoln's words. They're still studying it, hopefully, in schools today. But a lot of people have forgotten what happened here. And I think that's why we have 1.5 million, upwards of 2 million when we're back to normal, come here to Gettysburg. They want to familiarize themselves with what happened here, the heroism, tragedy, and sacrifice. And I think that the numbers, as colossal as they are, don't do it. What does it? This does it. Rudyard Kipling. History was told in the form of stories that would never be forgotten. And that's why we share stories as battlefield guides on the battlefield. If you're on the first day's battlefield, more often than not, and you're with a guide, the first story you're going to hear is a story of John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt. His tragic loss here at Gettysburg, his secret engagement to Kate Hewitt. It is indeed one such story. Before we get into the details, what I'd like to do, I don't know if this is anything anyone's considered this morning, but I have about 9:40. At this time, the battle is opened 159 years ago, and John Reynolds is on his way to the field. So I felt it's appropriate if we just take a moment, and I know I'm the only one talking right now, but if we just take about 15 seconds to contemplate what's about to take place on this battlefield, and certainly to honor John Reynolds' loss. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So what about this story? How about that? Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and it'll captivate you, and you'll never forget the first day's field when you find out about John Reynolds leading his troops in heroically on the front lines and struck down by a bullet, really in the prime of his life. He's not only a corps commander, he's in charge of an entire wing of the Union Army here, 3 corps. And as his body is removed from the battlefield, the realization sets in, those that are bringing him off the field and later examining the remains, that there's something amiss here. In fact, his West Point ring is nowhere to be found. Also, he has on his pinky a little gold ring inside inscribed with the words, "Dear Kate." And then around his neck, keep in mind he's a Presbyterian, is a silk cord with a cross and a heart, Catholic metal, a crucifix, not something you typically find on a Presbyterian. So the question is, what's up? What's up? Well, the answer is Kate Hewitt. And we find this out very soon. Reynolds' remains were taken from the battlefield and taken down to, well, through Westminster. It goes to Uniontown. Excuse me, not Uniontown. Hang on. It'll come. Yeah, not Union Mills. There's one more Union. Union Bridge, thank you. Age. So, Union Bridge. And it's important because everybody thought it was straight to Westminster, but Union Bridge is where he's placed in a proper coffin of sorts. It's not the coffin he's buried in, but they pack him in ice. Taken to the family home, ultimately his sister's home, Kate Landis, in Philadelphia. And the body arrives at 2 o'clock in the morning on July 3rd. That's how soon. Well, that morning, later on, there's a knock on the door. And a young lady introduces herself. And she is indeed Kate Hewitt. Imagine, if you could, put yourself into her shoes. She loves John Reynolds. She has just found out he's been killed. She's devastated. She has his West Point ring. And she feels she needs to visit the family, to tell them of their love for one another and to return the ring. And this she does, very bravely. And to the family's credit, they welcome her with open arms. They can see how devastated she is by the loss, weeping copiously. And then she begins to unfold the story of their secret engagement. She had boarded a ship in San Francisco, July 21st, 1860, to head east, to start anew again in her life, this time to convert to Catholicism. John Reynolds is boarding the vessel also. He's coming east to be commandant at West Point. And they meet on the vessel, and they fall in love as she tells the story. Now they'll go their separate ways, so to speak, when the war begins. And of course, they're in touch with one another. We do not have those letters. But ultimately, what we do have is letters from the family that speak to Kate's experiences after John is killed here at Gettysburg. And that involves one more bit of intrigue to this story. And that's the promise that Kate Hewitt made to John Reynolds. And that poignant promise is this: if he were to be killed during the war, she would seek a religious life. Now, I used to say she would join the convent. Not true. Not true. The Daughters of Charity has their own terminology, and we'll talk a little bit about this. She's not going to be a nun, ultimately. She's seeking to be a sister with the Daughters of Charity. But that's one of the nuances I discovered through my research that I was unaware of. But the bottom line is she's made this promise, and will she keep it? True to her word, she begins the process. A letter's written just days after John Reynolds is killed, and the process thereby begins. She serves a period of postulancy in Baltimore at Mount Hope, and ultimately with the Daughters of Charity in Emmitsburg, March 17, 1864, she begins the formal process of becoming what they call a seminary sister. And for 3 years, more or less, she sticks with it. In fact, her first mission is in Emmitsburg, and then ultimately she travels to Albany, New York, to serve there. But she disappears after about 3 years. No one ever knew Kate Hewitt's fate. There had been some thoughts on what happened to her, some possible identifications, but nothing solid. And fortunately, joining with Mary Stanford Pitkin, we were able to locate a genealogy and subsequent information to lock this down once and for all of what happened to Kate Hewitt. So let's share a few things to walk us through the research that I did. I call this behind the scenes, and we'll get to that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the headlines. You know, publisher wants you to have people buy your book. And I would love for you to buy the book and keep the publisher happy. But it's not really. Well, I was going to say don't quote me, but this will be on YouTube. I want you to buy the book because I think, you know, if you're a big-time publisher, you're making a lot of money, you're a guy at Gettysburg, you publish a book, it's not about the money. It's about the passion for the subject matter. I wrote the book because I was so anxious to share all the findings that I came upon in this process with Mary and on my own. I wanted to share that with everyone. So I would encourage you to take a serious look. What's new? The headlines. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at how many rare and first-time images the book features. And for the first time, really brings this all together. You know, there's a landmark biography on John Reynolds written in 1958 by Edward Nichols, and it stands the test of time. But, you know, limitations were there as far as the number of images. Thank goodness History Press allowed me. I think there's 68 images in the book. The making of Gettysburg, Gettysburg's Lost Love Story, primary sources behind the scenes. We'll get to that as well. So what's new? What's new? The headlines. Mystery solved. We found Kate Hewitt. We can tell you now her true fate. The fact that not long after leaving the Daughters of Charity, she falls in love again. Probably never thinking she'd have a chance to do so. She had met a man named Joseph Fort while at the working for the Daughters of Charity, serving, with the Daughters of Charity in Albany, and he was a florist in town. And ultimately, they fall in love, and they will marry. They will marry in 1874 in June. They will be married a couple years, and she will pass. But she will make her mark in life a number of ways while she's there as an independent person and then as a married woman. And we'll talk about that. Kate's California years. And that's the tough part. Historians will tell you, you know, that you have to stick true to the facts you find. And we found out something rather startling about Kate Hewitt, but that's on the surface. If you delve down a little deeper and look at circumstances that faced women in the 19th century, maybe it's not all that startling what Kate encountered in her life. And we'll talk about that. Fresh insights to John Fulton Reynolds. So when I wrote the book, it was initially just going to be about Kate, but I felt that that's not fair. There's going to be a lot of people read this book that don't know about John Fulton Reynolds, maybe non-historian types, if you will. Maybe the majority of the people. I thought they needed to know about John Fulton Reynolds. And I leaned heavily on Nichols. And I leaned heavily also on Mike Riley's fine work, published in the 1990s, For God's Sake Forward. And excellent monograph on Reynolds. But I also delved back into the primary sources and developed a few points that really no one's ever drilled down on, I think. And so I bring these out in the book, and we can talk a little bit about that here as well. What else do we have? Numerous corrections, clarifications, and details. So it's the wild, wild west out there, right? We have the internet. And I always tell my grandchildren, don't trust certain websites. Drill down a little bit. Find out if they're reliable. And so as I began to research this, and the way I got into it, to be honest with you, I was working on another project. Navy Connections to the Battle of Gettysburg. Published an article for Navy History magazine on this not too long ago, last summer. I'm fascinated by it, having worked for the Navy for 33 years. Well, one connection is William Reynolds, John Reynolds' brother. He's an admiral in the United States Navy. So I'm working on that project, and I go over to John's side of the story, and I say, maybe a sidebar on the Kate John story would be appropriate here. And I began to delve into it a little more, and I knew the story as much as possible. But when I started looking online, I'm seeing everything under the sun. She's from Owego. No, she's from Oswego. She's a nun. She's not. She did this, that, and the other. And I said, it's time to straighten this out once and for all, as much as humanly possible. And hopefully I've done that. Kate's award-winning artwork at Philadelphia Centennial. Kate Hewitt had made a name for herself with her embroidery skill. And it actually goes back to John Reynolds, and there's a nice story about a handkerchief I'll share with you shortly. But found out something about her I had no idea, and we'll talk about that as well. Had to do with her ability as an artist, actually. And so then finally, the essence of Kate's story. And it is an essence that's amazing. A story of perseverance, knocked to the canvas time and time again, and gets up. And gets up. And so she, to me, is a perfect example of triumph over adversity. And I like to point that out in the book as well. So what's new on Kate? What's new on Kate? Let's talk about her for a minute. So it is indeed Owego, not Oswego. She is from Owego, New York, and there's a big difference location-wise. Kate has a brother. I don't know if many of you realize it, but if you read the letters closely that John Reynolds' sisters, Jenny and Ellie, sent to William Reynolds, when John Reynolds was killed, they wrote to him on July 5th. They go into great detail. And they mentioned that Kate had mentioned she had a brother. They were estranged. He was Baptist. She was not. No one had ever located the brother. We were able to do so. We were able to identify him as having been from Owego, which was helpful because we could never find Kate's parents. Despite the extraordinary skills of Mary Pitkin, we could not find, and we had names. So there's possible reasons for that I outline in the book. But the bottom line, Benjamin Hewitt lived, and he lived in Owego, and he was mentioned with regard to property she left behind when she died. He's mentioned as the postmaster there. We'll talk about some of that later. I'll show you some images. Alias Kate Wentworth. Who in the world is Kate Wentworth? When Kate got aboard a vessel to come back east on July 21st, 1860, there happened to be a reporter on the ship who wrote quite an informative article about his experience on the vessel. If you want to know what travel was like in 1860, heading down to Panama and across the isthmus and back up, you should read this. But he also makes express mention of Kate Wentworth being aboard the vessel. General Harney, many officers, of course Reynolds was one, but he mentions this Kate Wentworth and how well she had behaved, of worthy of mention because she had been involved in quite a controversy there on the West Coast, something called the Bruton Affair. And what it was is, he says, Kate Wentworth traveling as C. Hewitt, and that's what caught her eye. Wait a minute, Kate Hewitt. Kate Hewitt shows up on the passenger list of the vessel coming out of Panama, the North Star, SS North Star, moving up to New York. So we know she's on this trip, and this must be our Kate Hewitt, and that allowed us to drill down and determine more about her life. Previously known images, and portrait and battlefield visit. Would you believe there's a picture of Kate Hewitt on the battlefield with the Reynolds family? This picture had been published, and it was remarkable when it was, and mention was made that this was Reynolds family members at the slaughter pen area of the battlefield, if you know where that is, across from the Devil's Den. But no one had ever mentioned the fact that one could be Kate Hewitt. Well, we did some photo analysis of the two previously known existing issues of Kate Hewitt, and then finally this new image that came to the fore. And Katie Cleaver's mom, Ann Cleaver Hoffman, was instrumental in that side of the family's preservations of documents and images. And she had an image of the family posing by the boulders in Devil's Den like so many people did at that time. This is November 1863. And in there, on the bottom, were labeled everyone that was in the picture, including Kate Hewitt. So through photo analysis, through that cross confirmation, if you will, we were able to determine, and you can see that this is indeed Kate. And so we were fascinated by that. The family will visit the battlefield again the following spring with Charles Vail, who was Reynolds' orderly, to see the location where he was actually killed. They were in earnest trying to find it in November of '63, but weren't able to do so. And then Daughters of Charity, the terms, the details, I mentioned this a minute ago, drilling down, seminary sisters, different vows, not final vows. There's a lot of nuances to the way, and all this is heavily documented in my endnotes. So if you're into such things, it's there. It was important to me to be accurate in that regard, so that's why I paid particular attention to that. But I think it's beneficial for everyone to know. The marriage to Joseph Fort, I alluded to a few minutes ago, is certainly significant. The book will show you where they lived. It will show you where she lived, images of where she lived in Albany once she left the Daughters of Charity. It will show you where she lived when she was with the Daughters of Charity. And I was fortunate to have many people, expert historians from Albany, help me in this regard, and fortunate that there were images extant, images, maps, you name it. And it was very beneficial. So we have all that for you as well. And then the award-winning artwork. I'm putting out an all-points bulletin. If anybody can find the banner that Kate Hewitt created for the Centennial exhibition, I need to know about it, all right? Find me, please, because I've looked long and hard everywhere imaginable to find this banner, which was written about in so glowing terms that it will knock your socks off. I mean, this lady had a phenomenal talent, and this huge banner was so artistic that one reporter said in the women's pavilion, which is unique at that time, think about this, 1876, beautiful facility for women's, I mean, this is science, this is art, this is every aspect of what could be done on display there. But Kate Hewitt's banner caught his eye, and he said there are two items here that deserve special recognition, and her banner was one. And it was so beautiful that it received a special award given out at the Centennial. That's how significant. Where's the banner? We do not know. Let's hope it's in someone's attic. Things still turn up all the time, and I haven't given up looking, trust me, and hopefully we can find it. And then, of course, the death and the funeral and the burial. And we'll talk a little more about this when I get into some details later on my behind-the-scenes images I want to share with you. So this is just a slide, and I'm going to let you look at the screen, and I'll look at my laptop here so I can go over some of this with you. New image of Kate. We talked about that on the cover. I think that's a remarkable image. If you look at the headgear she's wearing there, the hat, it's wonderful because it helps us date when the image was taken. I was fortunate to work with Military Images folks magazine on 2 existing images. That allowed me some skill set when I got this image to date it. John's West Point class ring. Who hasn't wanted to know about John's? What happened to the ring? Where is it? What's it look like? I don't know if you know, but class of 1841, the West Point class rings were not all the same. Not all the same. And so they were unique. And John's was indeed unique. And I was able, through the good graces of the family we have here, to get a wonderful, wonderful description of the ring. And then, my gosh, Dale Gallen so graciously, you know, the artist Dale Gallen, recreated this ring for me, and there's an image in the book, an artist's impression of the ring. And so I invite you to see that. Many other things here, images in the book of John's home and school, great artwork. There's a telescope that was at the Lidditz School where John attended as a young man. Kate's hometown, wonderful description provided by the Historical Society there. A discussion of what schools she might went to, images of the town. Kate's brother's grave, images of that. Period art. John in Mexico. Mexico war art. Looking for the artwork for your book is a challenge. Anyone that's published a book can tell you that. I have no staff to support me on that, so it was my labor, but it was a labor of love. And I discovered a couple great images to go along with the descriptions of John's experiences serving in the war with Mexico in the 1840s. The SS San Francisco and the SS California, 2 ships that played a role in John's life. He may have drowned on the SS San Francisco. This is when they're moving elements of the 3rd Artillery from the East Coast to the West Coast. And they decide to use a vessel to do so. John is on leave at the time. Fortunately for him, not on the vessel, when it sinks off the coast of Delaware in a horrific storm in December of the year. Not a hurricane, mislabeled as a hurricane by many. My colleague that I worked with on our research on the weather in the battle informed me that that's absolutely not a hurricane that time of year, in all likelihood a heavy nor'easter. But John escaped that. SS California, he's on that ship coming into the Columbia River in Oregon. And you cross the Columbia River bar, it's known as the graveyard of the Pacific. The ship flounders, almost sinks, and John says he couldn't believe that they all didn't die. We have images of those in the book. Fort Vancouver, there's a wonderful picture. I had never seen this before. I don't believe it's ever been published anywhere with regard to John Reynolds. He's in it. He's in the picture on a horse with the 3rd U.S. Artillery. Images of Sacramento, the harbor. Believe me, I want to show you what the harbor of San Francisco looks like in July of 1860, not 1865, not 1855. It took a little work to get there. I invite you to look at that image in the book. The SS Golden Age, the ship that John and Kate meet on. That's got to be in there, right? In the book. Beautiful, beautiful drawing of the book. Eden Hall, where Kate went in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, to convert to Catholicism. Beautiful works by Wad and Forbes. I know you've seen a lot of their work in connection to John's time in the Civil War, different battles. Really cool image of Abraham Lincoln that I found. The Library of Congress website, some of you may have seen it. To me, it was apropos because it was dated about the time that Lincoln offered Reynolds command of the Union Army, the Army of the Potomac, that is. Beautiful portrait of John Reynolds hat and saddle, which is held here by the foundation, donated and obtained, I should say, because the family made it available and was able to get images that's in the book. The Reynolds tree, marked by Charles Vail with an R, where Reynolds was killed. Wonderful image provided to me by Sue Boardman, who was so generous. Beautiful image in the book. 1829 Spruce Street, where the sister lived, where the remains were taken in Philadelphia. That's Rittenhouse Square, if you don't know the town. Kate at Gettysburg, we talked about that. A beautiful etching of the scene at the slaughter pen created by Ann Cleaver Hoffman, who was so great in maintaining invaluable documentation of the family. Daughters of Charity, image of the campus there in Emmitsburg. Albany images I mentioned, the residences, the school, and the handkerchief. The handkerchief story, handkerchief that was being created by Kate Hewitt for John Reynolds. He died before she could give it to him. She ended up giving it to Charles Vail, his trusted orderly. And the Vail family saved this handkerchief for years and years and years. Beautifully embroidered, as you might expect. This handkerchief was in a museum in Prescott, Arizona. Prescott, Arizona. It's in the book. And a wonderful image of Charles Vail himself. And an image of the medal that Kate received, and an image of Kate's grave. Kate's grave in St. Agnes Cemetery, Menands, New York, just outside of Albany. We dedicated a new stone there for Kate. Now, the making of Gettysburg, and I want to emphasize this because you've got to go to the primary sources. It's a little tough to read any of this, of course, from where you're sitting, but to your left is an excerpt from the letter that Charles Vail, Reynolds' orderly, who was right next to him when he was killed, wrote to David McConaughey. You probably recognize that name. And the quote that's used so often with regard to Reynolds urging troops into battle, "Forward, men, forward, for God's sake, chase those fellows out of the woods." This is where we got it. We go to the original documents. The image I mentioned out at Fort Vancouver, there it is. John is on a white horse to your far left. And then the other letter, this is from the family writing to their brother about their experience in meeting Kate Hewitt. She had his consent to enter a religious life if he should lose him, and this she does. This is what we look for as historians. You want to go to the source documents. You can't rely upon the secondary. Oh, they're good leads in many secondary sources, trust me, but then you go back and find the originals. Courtesy of Franklin and Marshall College, right here. John Fulton Reynolds' birthday. You'll see it in many sources listed as the 20th of September. John Reynolds himself wrote that the Battle of Monterey opened on his birthday, September 21st. So we know it's September 21st. So this, of course, is discussed in the book. And here's something that I think we can all enjoy. John Reynolds' class ring, as portrayed by Dale Gallen, to the good graces of the family allowing us to do so. The handshake. Dina forget, the Scottish phrase, which means we will never forget the bond we have built here together at West Point. Thank God, we now know what John Fulton Reynolds' ring looked like. If you study John Reynolds, and again, Nichols' book and Mike Riley's book does a wonderful job describing his experience in these battles, which jumped out at me. You know, Chamberlain, and we discuss this all the time as guides, there are a lot of heroes here at the battle. You want to talk about all of them. But this quote just jumped off the pages of the original source document here at the Battle of Second Manassas, when John Reynolds' men were holding down the fort, covering the retreat of the Union Army. The Union Army could be annihilated if not for Reynolds' men and also the men of Sykes, his regulars. And they're doing their best, but John Reynolds will grab a regimental flag, ride up and down the lines. Now, boys, give them the cold steel, give them the steel, charge bayonets, double quick. See, Reynolds is setting a precedent for being out front, leading from the front. Reynolds is almost killed a number of times in peacetime, almost killed in the Mexican War a number of times, and believe me, he's in the front lines at the Battle of Mechanicsville. In the 7 days, he's in the front lines at Second Manassas. It's a miracle of sorts that John Reynolds survived until the Battle of Gettysburg. And it's no surprise that he's on the front lines here at Gettysburg. And you can debate whether or not a corps commander, a wing commander should have been that far to the front. But I see many reasons why he's there, but I know this much. Meade should have known that Reynolds is not going to lay back. Reynolds likes to lead from the front, irrespective of where he is in command structure. And he's at the front, defending native ground. He has seen one failure after another, and he aims, I believe, this time to see that the Union Army stands firm in defending Pennsylvania soil. Kate was from Owego, not Oswego. How in the world does Jeff know this? Let's go to the primary sources. From the Society of the Sacred Heart at the top, that's where Kate attended school to convert to Catholicism. You can see right there the arrows pointing to Tioga County, where Owego is located. You can also see 2 documents from the Daughters of Charity archives, and both point to it being Owego. Now, one of them is very light, and the way it's written, you could almost think that says Oswego. And working with the archivist down there, we had a discussion about that. But we had enough information to triangulate this, if you will, and know that it was indeed Owego. So again, clearing up some of the discrepancies. These are the behind the scenes. Might not excite you, but when you're a historian, these are the things that really get you going. Kate's marriage, June 24th, 1874. What did the church look like? That church still stands, but it's no longer an active church. It's a sad thing, really. It's in great disrepair, number of efforts to restore it. Unfortunately, today, it's in terrible condition. But St. Joseph's in Albany is a beautiful structure. So there are some images for you to look at, able to dig these out. And then over on your right side of the screen, to me, this is fascinating. Liz Warner, a descendant of Joseph Fort from his second marriage, kindly shared the family Bible with us. It was her genealogy that Mary Stanford Pitkin first saw online that led us down the path to finding Kate. And there's the information about Catherine M. Hewitt's marriage to Joseph B. Fort. And then a wonderful lady named Peg Harrington went out of her way. The archives for St. Joseph's are not located at St. Joseph's anymore. They're at a different church in Albany. She went to the church. Their marriage records have been replicated in modern documents. She found the original. And you can see the Latin there. Even names the officiate. Fascinating stuff. A nice way to tie up the story. Her brother, Benjamin Hewitt. There's the grave. There's a report from a Owego Gazette, October 12th, 1876, talking about Benjamin Hewitt just came back from a funeral in Albany of none other than Catherine Fort, his sister. I think that's confirmation enough that he was indeed her brother. Again, something no one had ever tied together, and we were blessed, trust me, blessed to be able to do so. And there's the image, Kate Hewitt on the battlefield. Now, she's with the family in the slaughter pen, and we have that image from the family. But this is the image, of course, at the Devil's Den. And you zoom in, and it's that young lady in the middle. That is indeed Catherine Hewitt. November 1863, on the battlefield at Gettysburg. When the family comes back with Charles Vail in the spring, we believe late March, very early April, they will come to the spot on the battlefield where John Reynolds was killed. And then they will go to Emmitsburg and visit Kate Hewitt with Charles Vail. And that's when she presents, Charles Vail, Kate, presents to him the handkerchief she had been creating from John. An image of that handkerchief, again, is in the book. The internment book. Not easy to tie all this together. And we had to dig deep, no pun intended, to get the information on Kate's remains. A number of bodies in the family plot. So this is the internment book, which also confirmed for us that she died of consumption. In the family letters exchanged between John's sisters and Charles Vail, in which they updated him on Kate's life with the Daughters of Charity, they mention a cough that's very persistent. And we suspected that she had tuberculosis, consumption, and she did indeed die of it. Dug a little further, because there was confusion of where she might be buried in the plot, and found that Joseph Fort, the day after she died, purchased the property in the cemetery. And the next day, Kate is buried. Even though some of the old documents from the cemetery, replicated from originals, seem to indicate she is nowhere to be accounted for in there. She's in there, but they don't identify the exact vault. I believe she's in Vault 1. Why would Joseph Fort bury her anywhere but Vault 1 in a brand new plot of ground there? The information from the cemetery in a replicated document says that his second wife is there. But we do know she's in the overall plot, and we have the memorial stone there to her. And this brings it all together, I think. What more could you ask for as a historian? And thank goodness so many newspapers are digitized. Look at this. Yesterday afternoon passed peaceably away the wife of Mrs. J.B. Fort, the florist. The lady had been ailing for some time. She was a true Christian woman, and her death will be deeply mourned. Prior to her marriage, Mrs. Fort, then Miss Hewitt, kept a select school on the North Pearl Street. She taught independently after she left the Daughters of Charity. At one period of her life, this estimable lady was a cloistered nun, of course we know sister, in the Roman Catholic sisterhood. And there she is. Beautiful pictures of her, I think. Enough said. You know, I started talking about how can we remember the heroism, tragedy, and sacrifice of this battlefield. And as a guide and a historian, I think there's no greater way than to remember the stories here on this battlefield, irrespective of where you are on the field. And I think if you remember Kate and John and her story, the tragic loss, his heroism, and then her perseverance, her ability to overcome adversity, I think you will better remember Gettysburg. There's some contact information. Again, team effort. Jeff Harding didn't write this book. A team wrote this book. My heartfelt thanks to everyone mentioned in the acknowledgements, and then some. There's contact information. It's best for me through my publisher. Mary Stanford Pitkin indicated she's happy to have me share her contact information with her genealogy website. If you need to know something about a family or you're researching Civil War, contact Mary. Trust me. Tell her I sent you. All right. We have a few minutes for some Q&A. And then they tell me that I'm going over and sign some books. So I hope to see you over there. Again, not to run up the numbers because nobody's getting rich off this. I want to share all of this with you. Now, like Robert E. Lee, I'm a bit of an optimist. If you look, I have 3 pens in my pocket. You know, right before the last day of the battle, I always tell people on tours, you got to look at what's happening. And Meade, he's not so certain. You know, Lee is an optimist. That proverbial cup is always half full. Meade's not so certain, so he has a council of war. It didn't work out too well for Lee. He should have had a council of war. He should have discussed a few things. Maybe he wouldn't have been so blinded by the success he had. But either way, hopefully I'm not blinded by success. I'm there to sign books. I hope to see you over there, even if you just want to come by and chat.
Okay, Jeff, thanks so much.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
All right, I got a couple I got a couple last-minute notes for you all, some housekeeping measures. First of all, the next presentation will be in this tent. Diane Miller Somerville will be here to talk about psychological trauma in the Civil War, 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. Jeff will be signing his book inside right here for the next hour or so. And you also should know that he's got a new article out in Gettysburg magazine, which will also be next to him. And ironically enough, it's on the weather at Gettysburg. How hot is it on July 3rd? And Jeff, working with a meteorologist, has solved the mystery as to how it actually felt. We know what the air temperature was during the Battle of Gettysburg because one of our college professors recorded it, but no one has ever been able to calculate what the field temperature, the heat index, the dew point, I don't know, is that what we call it, Jeff, before? But Jeff and the meteorologist have been able to do that, and the Gettysburg magazine is going to be right next to him. He wrote that article, which is very interesting. Also want to say, if you want to see more things like this, help us. Go join the Friends Desk. Go to the Friends Desk, become a member of the Gettysburg Foundation, help the Gettysburg National Military Park and the Eisenhower National Historic Site, and also see our new exhibit, which just opened this morning at 8:30, called A Rough Course Life. It has new objects never before displayed in the Gilder Lehrman Changing Gallery here at the main visitor center, and you get in free with a membership, or you get a ticket to the cyclorama, the film, or the museum, you get in. But that's the first exhibit we've had in that gallery for 3 years, and so we're really, really proud to get to have it there. So we want to thank Jeff again, thank all of you, and we will reconvene back here, everyone, in about a half an hour, okay? Thanks.